Could that watch you saw in Walmart be a secret gem? Today, we're going through 8 watches under $100. And no, it is not about the watches being cheap. It's about the 8 watches that when you understand what they actually are, you will question everything you thought you knew about what a watch is supposed to cost. Number 8 is going to feel almost too obvious. By number 1, I think you'll feel something closer to outrage. Number 8. Casio AE 1200 World Timer, $28 to $55. If you pick this watch up, it's light, almost aggressively so. The resin case looks like it belongs in a classroom, not a collection. Then you start reading the dial. 4 time zones, stored and displayable simultaneously. A stopwatch that counts to 24 hours. A countdown timer. A programmable alarm. And a 10-year battery. The whole thing costs roughly what you'd spend on dinner for 2 at a mid-range restaurant, drinks included. The watch community gave it a nickname years before any YouTube channel told them to, the Casio Royale. The origin is a related model that surfaced in photographs and had a passing resemblance to digital watches from spy films. The name migrated to the AE 1200 because the community decided it fit. When a community of people who spend evenings arguing about movement finishing agrees that a $28 watch deserves a nickname, that's a signal worth noting. But the real story of the AE 1200 isn't aesthetics, it's geography. In developing markets across Southeast Asia, West Africa, and South Asia, this watch has served as a primary timekeeping instrument for decades. Doctors doing hospital rounds where power cuts out unpredictably. Engineers on construction sites in climates that destroy smartphones in 6 months. Teachers who need to time exams with something that won't need charging, won't crack under a textbook, and won't attract a thief. Casio built a watch that is, at its core, an infrastructure product, and they've held the price point for so long that you start to wonder if they are a charity watch company. Here's what I mean. The AE 1200 wasn't $28 to $55 in 2005 because manufacturing was cheap. It was $28 in 2005 because Casio had spent 30 years optimizing the process to the point where margin was sustainable at that number. In 2026, after inflation, supply chain disruption, and post-pandemic manufacturing adjustments across the industry, it's still roughly the same price range. The optimization has compounded to a level that borders on industrial art. Drop it in a bag. Forget about it. Find it 5 years later. The battery hasn't died. The time is still right. On a Watch You Seek forum thread from 2023, a member mentioned offhand that he'd been wearing his AE 1200 for 11 years on the original battery. Nobody questioned it, because nobody was surprised. There's a specific kind of watch collector who buys expensive watches and then reaches for the AE 1200 when they don't want to think about their wrist. The person who owns a $5,000 Seiko Spring Drive and wears it twice a month, but has the AE 1200 buckled on every Tuesday morning for the commute. The watch that never needed to earn anything, because it started with everything already. No boutique required, no waiting list, no authentication certificate. Just time zones and a stopwatch and 10 years of battery and the quiet confidence of something that never asked to be impressive. The AE 1200 is the kind of object that makes you think differently about the things you spend money on. Not because it's luxurious, because it isn't, and it doesn't need to be, and it just keeps going. 11 years on, 1 battery. Number 7 is double the price and introduces the most surprising dial in budget horology right now. Number 7, Addy's Dive AD 2030 Sand Dial, $59 to $97. In 2023, a small Chinese micro-brand put a watch on the market, whose dial immediately started appearing in Watch You Seek threads and Reddit posts next to photographs of Grand Seiko's white birch and snowflake dials. Dials that live inside watches costing between $3,000 and $8,000. People weren't comparing them ironically. They were comparing them seriously. The AD 2030's dial has a subtly rippled, organic sand grain texture. It catches light differently at every angle, shifting from cream to warm gold depending on where you're standing and what's overhead. Grand Seiko achieves something similar through a dial-making process at their Shinshu facility in Nagano, involving hand-applied texture and multiple finishing stages carried out by a small group of artisans. The AD2030's dial is produced with considerably less ceremony. It still works. Inside is a Seiko VH31 Mecha Quartz movement. This is not a standard quartz caliber. Standard quartz beats once per second, so the second's hand jumps in that recognizable robotic tick. The VH31 beats 4 times per second, so the second's hand glides. The visual impression, to anyone who isn't actively watching for it, is mechanical. People who don't follow watches closely will assume it's an automatic. The case is 36 millimeters, small by modern standards, and genuinely petite on a larger wrist. But if you've spent any time studying vintage dress watches or the Grand Seiko models this watch clearly pays attention to, that proportion makes sense. The 46 millimeters lug-to-lug means it lies flat and doesn't hang off the wrist. It sits there, quietly looking expensive, not asking to be noticed. In 2025, Addy's Dive released a no-logo version. Gone is the brand name from the dial. Gone is Deep Sea Hunter from 6 o'clock. The crown is anonymous. The caseback is blank. What remains is the sand texture, the silver hands, and nothing else. For the collectors who care about dial design and find branding a distraction, it's the definitive version of an already good watch. Here's the observation that matters. Grand Seiko isn't charging $8,000 for that dial specifically. They're charging $8,000 for the movement finishing, the hand-polished case bevels, the heritage of a brand operating since 1960, the bracelet, the box, the authorized dealer experience. The dial is 5% of that price. At most, Addy's Dive isolated that 5% and sold it to you for $59 to $97. That's not cutting corners. That's a lesson in what you're actually paying for when you buy expensive things, and what it might be possible to separate from everything else. And this is worth sitting with for a second. The watch community spent years treating dial quality as the exclusive territory of established names with established prices. What the AD2030 did was make that assumption testable. You can now put a $50 dial next to a $3,000 dial and ask yourself, honestly, what you're seeing. Some people do that and conclude the $3,000 dial is clearly better. Some do it and find the gap much narrower than the price suggests. The point isn't which conclusion you reach. The point is that the AD2030 made the question possible to ask at all, and before 2023 it wasn't. That AD2030 surprised people who already knew watches well. Number 6, surprised almost everyone else, because most people didn't know the full story. Number 6, Casio F91, W15 to $30. This one needs a moment. Not because it's complicated, because of what happened to it. The F91W is, by most reasonable estimates, the most manufactured watch in the history of horology. Casio began producing it in 1989. They have not stopped. Hundreds of millions of units. The precise production number is proprietary, but the scale is broadly accepted in the watch community as genuinely extraordinary. At certain points in the 90s and early 2000s, factories were producing them faster than the logistics chain could absorb. It costs $15 to $30. In 2004, U.S. military intelligence flagged the F91W as a component appearing with unusual frequency in improvised timing devices in conflict zones. The watch appeared in proceedings at Guantanamo Bay. One defense analysis named it specifically. A particular report described it as a symbol of a certain group's preferred operational equipment. Casio issued no statement. There was nothing useful to say. The watch was available for $15 to $30 in every market on Earth. Its battery lasted 7 years. It was accurate to within 30 seconds per month. It was waterproof enough for field conditions, small enough to conceal, and durable enough to survive heat, sand, and altitude. The same properties that made it problematic in one context made it indispensable in 100 others. A construction site in Lagos, a classroom in Karachi, a nurse's wrist during a 12-hour shift in a hospital in Manaus. The F91W didn't become notable because of what it was. It became notable because it was so functional that everyone used it, including people no one wanted to have reliable timing. That is a genuinely strange legacy for a watch at that price point. And it's a legacy that makes the next chapter of the story almost poetic. Watch enthusiasts are rediscovering the F91W now, and not as a joke. On WatchCrunch, threads from 2024 and 2025. Collectors who own Speedmasters and IWC pilots, and even entry-level Pateks, describe choosing the F91W for casual days out. One thread member put it plainly, "There's something about wearing the most democratic object ever manufactured that feels like honesty." They're not wrong. This watch is currently on more wrists, in more countries, across more economic circumstances, than any other timepiece ever made. That is not a marketing claim. It's a manufacturing reality, keeping time right now on more wrists than any watch from any Swiss maison has ever touched combined. So when a serious collector says the F91W feels like honesty, they're not being ironic. They're pointing at something real. The watch doesn't pretend to be what it isn't. It doesn't have a heritage story polished over generations of marketing. It doesn't have a wait list designed to make you want it more. It has a resin case, a digital display, and a 7-year battery. And it is, right now, keeping time for a nurse in Sao Paulo, an engineer in Manila, a student in Nairobi, and a watch collector in Geneva who owns 6 figures worth of Swiss horology and still reaches for the Casio on a Friday. That's the quietly uncomfortable truth the F91W carries. It's not a compromise, it's a choice. And for a growing number of people who understand what watches actually do, it's the right one. The most manufactured watch in history. Number 5 has the opposite origin story. Built once, in one country, for one very specific kind of water. Number 5, Vostok Amphibia, around $60 to $80. This one is weird, in a good way. The Amphibia was commissioned by the Soviet Navy in the mid-60s for military divers operating in conditions that Swiss dive watches of the era weren't designed to handle. The engineering brief was essentially this: build a watch that works at depth, survives field conditions, and can be serviced by a watchmaker with basic tools anywhere within the Soviet sphere of influence. The team at the Vostok factory in Chistopol, a city in Tatarstan roughly 1,000 kilometers east of Moscow, produced something that remains, technically, one of the most original dive watch case designs in history. Here's the idea. The crown screws into the case, standard for a dive watch. But the case back uses external water pressure to increase its own seal. The deeper you descend, the more the surrounding water compresses the case back against its gasket, and the tighter the watch becomes. It is a watch that gets more watertight as the conditions become more hostile. The pressure that would compromise a poorly engineered watch is the same pressure that makes the Amphibia more secure. No Swiss manufacturer of that era was pursuing this. Because Swiss watch design assumes a service infrastructure, a watchmaker reachable by post, spare parts available through an authorized network, a customer who expects their watch back in 2 weeks with a service certificate. Soviet watch design assumes you're on your own. That's not an inferior philosophy. It's just a different one, built for a different kind of problem. The movement inside is the 2416B caliber, a mechanical automatic. It's inaccurate by modern expectations. 15 seconds per day is typical. Some run closer to 20. But it's a serviceable, genuine automatic with a manual wind function, a hacking seconds hand, and parts that remain available cheaply. No watch at $60 to $80 anywhere can match the in-house automatic movement history the Amphibia carries. Honestly, I'm not sure I fully buy the idea that the Amphibia is just an interesting curiosity. The caseback pressure seal is a conceptually elegant engineering solution to a problem that every dive watch faces. It's just that no one else thought to solve it that way, and the fact that it came out of a factory in a city that moved inland to hide from bombing raids gives it a context that no amount of Swiss heritage can replicate. Sourcing note for 2026. Getting a Vostok cleanly through Western importers is more complicated than it was a few years ago for geopolitical reasons that will not surprise anyone. Research your source carefully. but as an object, as an engineering argument, and as a piece of horological history at $80. It earns its place on this list. What the Amphibia asks is a question the watch industry doesn't often have to answer. What happens when you design a watch for someone who can't get help? No service center, no spare parts network, no authorized dealer, just a diver, a case, and water. The answer, in Chistopol in the mid-60s, was a caseback that tightens under pressure. That answer is still sitting on the secondary market for around $80, waiting for someone to notice it. Soviet engineering, built for divers who couldn't count on anyone. Number 4 was built for water too, but the person who made it famous has very little ocean near him. Number 4, Casio Duro MDV 106, around $50 to $75. Bill Gates wore one, not at a tech conference, where the choice might be calculated for effect. Not in a magazine photoshoot staged to suggest humility. In an ordinary photograph, doing ordinary things, the man who could have bought the building that makes Rolex had a $50 to $75 Casio with a marlin fish printed on the dial. The watch community noticed. Some were surprised. Most of the people who'd been quietly daily driving Duros for years just recognized the watch and nodded. The MDV 106 was released in 2011. Since then, Casio has sold over 600,000 units with essentially no structural changes to the core design. That's not a product line refreshed with annual colorways and updated specs to justify a new marketing cycle. It's a watch that was right the first time, and Casio had the confidence to leave it alone. The community named it Duro before most people had heard of it. Tough, in Italian and in Spanish. When a community of people who spend evenings arguing about movement finishing agree on a name for something, that name is earned. The specifications read like a checklist from a dive watch costing 100 times more. 200 meters of water resistance, rated and real. A screw-down crown that prevents ingress under pressure. A screw-lock caseback. A unidirectional rotating bezel. A stainless steel case at 44.2 millimeters wide and 12.1 millimeter thick. All of it in a watch sold at Walmart. None of those are compromise features. A screw-down crown is a functional requirement in a serious dive watch, not a cosmetic one. Casio included it because the engineers took the brief seriously, not because the marketing department thought it would photograph well. The crystal is mineral glass. That's the honest flaw, worth stating clearly. Mineral glass scratches. It will mark if you knock it against concrete or drop it in a bag with your keys. It won't stay pristine over years of active use the way a sapphire crystal would. Some people find that fine, even appropriate. Tool watches collect marks, and marks mean the watch was used. Others want surfaces that stay clean. If you're in the second group, know this before you commit. But the case and mechanism? The people on Watch You Seek who have been wearing the same Duro through construction work, ocean swimming, and 8 or 9 years of daily wear consistently report that nothing breaks. The screw-down crown stays sealed. The bezel still clicks, the time is still right, and then there's the strap trick. Swap the stock rubber for a $15 stainless bracelet from any watch strap retailer. The transformation takes about 4 minutes and a small screwdriver. The result looks like a $500 Seiko. Nobody looking at your wrist can tell the difference. At a certain point, nobody being able to tell is the whole argument. Gates wore the Duro not to make a point. He wore it because it works. After everything else falls away, that's still the sentence. But here's the part of the Duro story that doesn't get said enough. The people who discover it tend to go through a specific sequence. First surprise, it's 44 millimeters, which sounds large, but it's thin enough and proportioned well enough that it feels smaller than the number suggests. Then confusion. How does this exist at this price? Then a long period of just wearing it, because there's nothing else to think about. And then, eventually, a sort of quiet loyalty that's very hard to explain to someone who hasn't been through it. The Watch You Seek threads about the Duro go back years. There's one that's been running since 2014, where people post their Duro after extended wear, ocean salt, construction dust, 8 years of daily driving. The watches in those photographs look used. They look like they've done something. And every single one of them is still running. That's not a coincidence. That's the Duro. The Duro earns everything it has. Number 3, earn something different. A place in a museum that has nothing to do with price. Number 3. Casio G-Shock DW 5600 $99.95. In 1981, a Casio engineer named Kikuo Ibe watched his father's watch fall from a bathroom counter and shatter on the floor. He spent the next 3 years, on his own time and on lunch breaks, trying to build a watch that wouldn't. Management was not supportive. Colleagues thought he was wasting his effort. The project nearly died twice. In 1983, the first G-Shock shipped. Drop it from a building, it works. Subject it to a 10-ton truck in a controlled test, it works. Casio used the truck test for marketing because they needed to convince people that something apparently impossible was actually true. The DW5600 followed, slimmer, squarer, closer to a standard wristwatch in profile. And then something happened that no one at Casio had planned for. NASA astronauts in the space shuttle era had the Omega Speedmaster as their official wrist instrument. But the Speedmaster is analog, for precision timing of mission experiments, for counting down to specific events logged against mission elapsed time. Astronauts began supplementing the official watch with personal choices. G-Shock models started appearing in shuttle mission photographs. The DW5600C and DW5600E were formally certified for spaceflight. According to a research database that tracks watches used in space missions, the DW5600 series accumulated 209 extraterrestrial journeys. The only watch that went on more missions was the Omega Speedmaster X33, which costs several times the price, 209 missions. At $99.95, there is a DW5600 on permanent display at the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., in the Moving Beyond Earth exhibition. The museum's label doesn't say certified or officially approved. It says crew preferred. That verdict came not from marketing, not from a sponsorship contract, from the people who sat on top of rockets and trusted their equipment with their lives. They chose the $99.95 G-Shock for the job that the official watch couldn't quite do. The practical limits of the DW5600 are real and worth acknowledging. The buttons are recessed behind the case structure, accessible by fingernail rather than fingertip. The LCD display offers none of the tactile pleasure of an analog dial, and the watch was not rated for EVA use outside the spacecraft. The temperature extremes and vacuum of space would compromise the LCD display, which is why the Omega Speedmaster holds the distinction of being the only watch certified for spacewalks. Inside the shuttle, though, crew preferred. The astronauts preferred it over what NASA issued. Number 2 can't match that story, but it's doing something every night while you sleep that most people don't know about. Before we move on to the next part, let me tell you this. Most people don't realize this, but buying a watch the wrong way can cost you thousands, and you won't even notice it until it's too late. You walk into a store or browse online, and everything looks the same, but behind the scenes, there's a system. Prices aren't always fair, availability is controlled, and one bad decision can leave you overpaying for something that doesn't even hold its value. That's why I created a complete free insider guide to buying watches. Inside, you'll find the best watches to buy, the watches to avoid, and how to choose a watch that actually fits your style and budget long term. The goal is simple. I'll help you stop guessing and start buying smart. You'll find the free guide in the pinned comment and description. Now, let's move on to the next part. Number 2, Citizen Garrison BM 818003 E $96, depending on where you get it. Here's a question nobody asks about quartz watches. Where does the energy come from? Battery, obviously. But a battery dies. You notice 2 days after it happens, in a meeting where someone asks you the time and you check your wrist and nothing is moving. Citizen solved this in 1976 with their first EcoDrive prototype. The technology is a photovoltaic cell embedded beneath a semi-transparent dial, the same physics as a solar panel, miniaturized. Any light source charges it. Indoor fluorescent lighting, the ambient glow from an office window, a reading lamp at night, a cloudy afternoon. All of it converts to electrical current that stores in a rechargeable cell inside the watch. Fully charged, the Garrison runs for 6 months in complete darkness. The BM 8180 003E is a military field-style watch. 37mm stainless case, Arabic numeral dial, woven olive canvas strap, a red sweep seconds hand that cuts sharp across the black background. The design isn't trying to impress you. Large numerals, luminous hands, clear. That's it. The brief was readability and durability, not elegance, and the watch doesn't pretend otherwise. There's a reviewer who bought his BM8 18003E in 2008 and checked back in 2020. 12 years of daily wear. Never changed the battery. In those 12 years, he'd bought 3 more. One for a nephew starting his first job who needed something that wouldn't let him down. One for a brother going through a difficult time who needed an object that asked nothing of him. And one to replace the strap on his original when it finally wore through. He kept all 3. He didn't see any reason to upgrade. I keep coming back to that specific detail. Buying a watch for a brother going through something hard because it asked nothing of him. That's the most accurate description I've read of what the Garrison actually is. An object that exists, runs, and doesn't need anything from you. That is rarer in a product than it sounds. Powered by light. Any light, from any source. Never needs a battery. Goes to job interviews and fishing trips and 3-day camping weekends without complaint. Doesn't ask to be charged. Doesn't ask to be wound. Doesn't ask. In 2026, the combination of field watch aesthetics, eco-drive technology, and sub-$100 pricing is getting harder to find in this specific configuration. Retail availability on specific references fluctuates. That's not a sales pitch. It's context. But beyond the logistics, what I think the Garrison actually represents is a philosophical position. We live in a world of subscriptions, of things that need charging, of objects that stop working the moment they lose connectivity. The Garrison is the counter-argument. It runs on whatever light it finds. It doesn't send you notifications. It doesn't need an app update. It doesn't negotiate with you. It just finds light, stores it, and keeps time for months on a single full charge. There's a version of elegance that gets overlooked in watch discussions because it doesn't involve finishing or heritage or a movement visible through the caseback. It's the elegance of something that works without being asked to. The Garrison has that. And at $80, it's the most underrated version of that quality in the entire under 100 category. A watch powered by any light that ever reaches it. Number 1 takes that further. It corrects itself against the most accurate timekeeping standard on Earth. Every single night. And nobody notices. Number 1, Casio G-Shock GW M5610, depending on where you get it. Let me tell you what this watch does. Every day, at a time you don't choose and don't need to think about, the GW M5610 listens. Radio signals from 6 atomic reference stations. Fort Collins in Colorado, Anthorn in the United Kingdom, Mainflingen in Germany, Fukushima and Saga in Japan, and Changchu in China, broadcast the exact time synchronized against the International Atomic Time Standard. That standard is maintained by approximately 400 atomic clocks distributed across 80 institutions in 50 countries. The GW M5610 receives that signal, compares its current reading against the broadcast. If there's a discrepancy, it corrects, automatically, without you touching anything. This watch is more accurate than the chronometers used to navigate the British Navy in the 19th century, more accurate than most hospital clocks. More accurate, technically, than any mechanical watch at any price point. Because no mechanical watch corrects itself against an atomic standard. Not the Rolex, not the Patek, not the Long. They are regulated to a high standard by skilled watchmakers. And then they drift. All of them drift. The GW M5610 does not, because every night it listens to an atom. And it's solar-powered. The same photovoltaic cell principle as the Citizen, embedded in the face panel. Any light charges it. The case is the DW5600 that astronauts chose in the shuttle era. Same dimensions. Same hollow structure shock resistance. Same resin construction refined over 40+ years of G-Shock production. What the GW M5610 adds to that already tested platform is radio synchronization and solar charging. The watch that the astronauts preferred now also self-corrects to atomic time. The version most consistently available under $100 is the GWM 56101. Black resin, black face. No color accent, no visual signal of what it's doing. The kind of watch you'd walk past in a display case 20 times and never stop for. Then someone tells you what it does every night. Here's what I keep returning to. The Swiss luxury industry built a beautiful, coherent, genuinely true story across the 20th century. That mechanical precision is the pinnacle of watchmaking craft. Hand-finished movements, lever escapements regulated under magnification, certified chronometer accuracy. That story is real. The craft behind it is extraordinary. I have no interest in dismissing it. And then Casio built something in Japan that self-corrects against a cesium atom reference, the kind of standard that national metrology institutes use to define what 1 second actually is, and sold it in a resin case for $95. That's not a refutation of fine watchmaking. It's a separate conversation that nobody saw coming. Precision and price are not the same argument. They never were. The GW M5610 just makes that impossible to talk around. There's a version of this watch on the wrists of people who have never spent more than $100 on any object they've owned, and a version on the wrists of collectors who also own a Lang and Patek Philippe, who wear it specifically because the argument it makes is the most concentrated one in the category. Those people are at opposite ends of the economic spectrum. They're wearing the same watch, paying the same $95, getting the same atomic correction every night. And that atomic correction happens whether you're sleeping or not, whether you care about horology or not, whether you've ever thought about what a second actually is or not. The watch listens to the signal. It corrects. It moves on. No ceremony, no notification, nothing to confirm that it happened. That restraint is the most sophisticated thing about it. The GW M5610 does something extraordinary every night and tells you nothing about it. In a world full of objects that announce their capabilities constantly, that is a genuinely unusual quality. The watch knows what it is. It doesn't need you to be impressed. That's the list. 8 watches. None of them are in competition with each other, and none of them are apologizing for what they are. The F91W isn't trying to be the Duro. The Garrison isn't trying to be the Amphibia. The GW M5610 isn't performing precision. It just finds the signal, checks itself, and moves on. What they share isn't a design philosophy, a country of origin, or a case material. Each one was built to do a specific thing, and each one does that thing without drama, without asking to be noticed, and for almost nothing. The watches that get the most attention in this hobby tend to have the most history, the most craft, or the most mystique. But the most useful question in horology is simpler than any of that. What do you actually need a watch to do? Drop that in the comments. I want to know. And tell me which watch on this list fits your answer, because I guarantee at least one of them does. I'll be reading every reply. And if there's a watch under $100 you think should have been on this list and wasn't, put that in the comments too. This category has more interesting things in it than 8 slots can hold. Let's find out what we missed. If you got this far, you're the kind of person who just sat through a serious conversation about a $15 Casio and found it genuinely interesting. So, hit subscribe. You are exactly the person helping our videos spread.